Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Happy New Year to all our viewers. I hope you have been subscribing away. I have with me the pleasure of company of Mr. Rajeev Srinivasan. Rajeev, welcome to PGurus channel.
Hi, Sri. Good to be chatting with you in the new year. I hope you had a pretty good time. I guess you're in India now. I saw some presentations of yours. So welcome to India.
Thank you, Rajiv. And as a matter of fact, viewers, we are in a location where actually upper clothing is optional. It's not cold here at all. But I have some excellent connectivity in deep south in Kovai, Coimbatore, and Rajiv is in Trivandrum, who is further 200 plus kilometers down south. And both of us are actually feeling the heat, believe it or not. But that is not that is not the topic we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the heat generated or the false heat generated by these CAA agitations being carried out. Rajiv, what are your thoughts on what happened yesterday night at JNU? What is this thing? These guys had everything timed to perfection.
Well, Sri, I mean, to put it very bluntly, make no bones about it, it appears to me that this was a false flag operation. The intent was twofold. One is, we can all see that the CAA agitation is dying down, okay? Couple of reasons. One is that there is the natural fatigue. You cannot carry on an agitation for a long time and a protest for a long time. People get tired of it. That's one. The second is there were several significant events that happened, of which I guess I'll just mention one. The attack on the Nankana Sahib in Pakistan, right? Where, the holiest shrine of the Sikhs, the place where Guru Nanak was born, was besieged by a group of Pakistani, I guess they were Shia, I don't know for sure, but they were basically saying there is no place for Sikhs here, we're going to destroy this place, we're going to rename it, things like that. And that's precisely the point behind CAA, whereby you're saying that there are these people of Indian cultural background, non-Muslims, who are being severely discriminated against, and therefore they need to be given some consideration in terms of quick, grant of citizenship. So that event was, on the one hand, taking the wind out of the sails of the CAA people, or rather anti-CAA people. The other, of course, is that the news cycle had moved on, and then what Donald Trump did with the assassination of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. Now, that was the thing that people are beginning to pay attention to. So in several ways, the anti-CAA agitation was running out of steam, and so they had to do something about it. And therefore, I think a certain set of vested interests, and we know who they are, and the usual suspects started something new, a riot in JNU. And a couple of interesting things there. One is that you notice that everybody was masked. And what this suggests is that the CCTV cameras are working, right? And you also noticed how there have been a number of people who were identified by CCTV cameras and who got a bill for the violence and for the destruction of public property. And therefore, they're wised up and they're saying, well, let's make the CCTV cameras infructuous or ineffective. So one thing you noticed in the JNU agitation was that everybody was wearing a mask. The second thing there was that, it's kind of remarkable. Okay, let's just step back for a minute and look at the genesis of it. What is happening in JNU is that there are two sets of people there. One is the humanities people, and the other is the sciences people. The sciences people have been minding their own business. In fact, JNU sciences are actually fairly good. The biological sciences and so forth, they're relatively high quality. Those people probably have nothing to do with the agitation. But a few days ago, I guess a couple of days ago, there was an attempt by a bunch of leftists to capture the information services, the IT services area. So they marched into the IT area and they unplugged all the computers and turned off all the servers. And I understand the reason was that it's time now to register for the next semester and the leftists were agitating to prevent people from registering for the next semester, and people were ignoring it, and they were registering, and they wanted to prevent that. And not being particularly IT savvy, this is interesting. They could probably have done a denial of service attack or something, but they couldn't. So they physically went there and turned off the lights inside the IT center. And the intent was to convey to the people who were on campus, who were saying, look, we're not interested in all this agitation. We want to move on with our next semester. They wanted to forcibly prevent them from registering. And that was the genesis of this problem. And when people were going against these fiats, and they were, in fact, siding with the people who were looking for peaceful continuation of education, which incidentally is the point behind JNU, rather than agitation, I would imagine. It's not meant for, shouting and protests and throwing stones and garrowing people and so forth. There are some people who are coming there to be educated, which is, interesting, and it's good. So the intent was to prevent all that. And as a result, it appears that a massive propaganda campaign, as well as a massive conspiracy, was hatched. And one of our very famous media people kind of let the cat out of the bag, because she tweeted something which showed a news group, WhatsApp news group, which was saying, let's do something to the lefties. And by the way, one of the numbers on that news group was the Congress outreach entity for crowdfunding. It was exactly the same number. Okay, so right there you smell a rat. And then somebody went back and chased down the antecedents of this group. And it appears that until yesterday, it had been a very anti-CAA group. And hurriedly, they changed their name to Let's Do Something to the Lefties. And at least one person who was there was identified as this, I think his name was Abdul Karim Cheriat or something. He's a Malayali Muslim who is studying at Hyderabad University. So I'm like, wait, all these little bits of information put together suggests that there was a conspiracy. And then furthermore, it's very interesting that a well-known former AAP person just happened to be at the gates of JNU, and Film and Television Institute people just happened to have a giant poster which they carried with them at night saying, ABVP has attacked JNU people. And then Shashi Tharoor and his AIPC people, Shashi,
so
go ahead.
I can't help but ask the question, why was YY sitting and happening to be there right at the time of all these incidents?
Why was who?
Yogendra
Yadav. Why?
I don't know.
I mean, I think the man has a nose for these things. He knows. I mean, after all, he's supposed to be an election predictor, right? Therefore, he probably can predict these things. That is the gentlest and kindest interpretation I can give it. And then there's Swara Bhaskar, this girl who is sort of this banshee. She's running around tweeting like mad. And then I was saying, Shashi Tharoor has been tweeting like nonstop, and his AIPC people, they're all in this, huge flurry of activity. So I'm like, wait, you put two and two together and you come to the conclusion that this is not some kind of an accident. It was a conspiracy. And what's going on is that it's pretty clear that this government, cannot be, okay, stepping back. Another little point of conflict, or a little point of interest here is, the central government is taking every possible step that it can to diffuse the situation, right? They're going around, trying to explain to people. Amit Shah was over there in some, colony in Delhi, and I heard that these girls started shouting at him, and then the residents, incidentally, the girl happened to be a Malayali also. So I don't know, I guess Malayalis probably will end up being kicked out of residential facilities. So what happened is this girl shouted at Amit Shah, and so her landlord and all the other people in that apartment building have requested that she vacate immediately. So I don't know, this is not looking good for Malayali people, because wherever you look, you see them in the middle of all this. But anyway, all that aside, so the central government is trying very hard to diffuse the situation, bring things down to normal, etc. And in the middle of that, it's very hard to imagine that they would go ahead and do something that would inflame the situation all over again, i.e., that they would order the police to go ahead and attack people, leftists at JNU. So there are lots of things that don't make any sense unless you use the what is that guy's name? The fellow who does the he simplifies things. Somebody's I'm forgetting. It's like
You're drawing a blank. That's all right.
I'm drawing a blank. It's like the simplest explanation is usually the most sensible explanation. Right. So the simplest explanation is that the Congress and friends, including a bunch of people in the media, and I won't name these people, but they're obvious. As soon as I said it's a woman, you know who it is. So these people are getting together and they're creating a ruckus and a fuss.
I also have a theory about this, Rajeev. You know, a certain individual, a shining beacon of the Congress party, was cooling his heels in Bihar, and the 370 abrogation happened, Ram Mandir judgment happened, not a peep from the minority community. And yet, after having spent 106 days, 100, having scored a century in Bihar, this individual comes out, and guess what? All of a sudden, mayhem breaks loose. I wonder if there's a connection there.
Well, I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised because, this particular individual was known to be the most powerful person in India because he had dossiers on everybody. So he's got dirt on all kinds of people. And I'm sure a little bit of a prod from him can get all sorts of people like the Yoyas and so forth agitated. They singing for supper is a long, it's a very respectable occupation in India, isn't it? So yeah, I'm sure that he's this particular shining star that you mentioned is also one of the, I don't know, what's he supposed to be, 179 IQ or something? A very clever man indeed, right? So yeah, that
wow.
could also.
I didn't know that his IQ was that high because some of his actions belie that. But that be that as it may, the takeaway here is that CAA is done and dusted. Perhaps the government got caught on the back foot because they did not expect India to, what they thought was a routine matter of, normalizing some 30,000 people who have been languishing for want of proper paperwork. That would just flare up in this way. Now, moving forward, I think this government is committed to bringing uniform civil code for sure, and also a ban on religious conversions. And I don't see those, again, evoking this kind of response because from this point forward, the government is going to be on its guard. It's going to probably try and choke off all points of unrest. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to unmask these masked men and women who might want to try and get around the CCTV cameras. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the leftists were really unprepared for surveillance. And I saw some video from Mangalore where these youngsters were going around and turning the video cameras away from they were entering private property and they were turning the video cameras away. And they were masked themselves. So what it means is that surveillance is hurting them, and the fact that they're being presented with large bills for damaging public property is very interesting. And I also wanted to digress for a minute before I come back to what you said, Sri. See, what you see in these riots and the destruction of public property, there was a remarkable video of this train that was completely burnt in Bengal. And that was being hauled away by a locomotive. That apparently was crores worth of damage to the Indian railways, right? And what's interesting is that as agitated as these protesters might be, and as violent as they got, there is this dramatic contrast between what happened in the anti-CAA protests and with what happened in the Sabarimala protests last year, because the Sabarimala pilgrims were brutalized. They were beaten up, they were, dragged off to jail, all kinds of things happened to them. but not one incident of the destruction of public property. And I think that is an important distinction, because the Shabarimala protesters, presumably all of them were Hindus, they view public property as the nation's property. And therefore, they're highly loath to do anything that's illegal or destructive. Whereas these people who are on the warpath were probably A, lefties, probably B, Bengali, that is East Bengali, Bangladeshis, who have no interest or no commitment to India or to India's property, right? So they felt no compunctions about burning and destroying Indian property. So I think there is a qualitative difference, between the kinds of things that happen where there is a legitimate grief or legitimate beef about something, and these sort of, what do they call them, astroturfed kinds of agitation. So I think the government would be justified, going back to your question, in taking whatever steps it can. And I think information technology should play a large part. And I've been a little reluctant to advocate the placement of large numbers of CCTVs for a couple of reasons. One is that almost all of them come from China, from a company called the Hikvision, if I'm not mistaken. So they have a monopoly on these CCTV cameras. And I'm pretty sure that all the images that are being captured are also slowly being diverted to China as well. So that is a point of concern, plus the privacy issue. But I'm now thinking that, despite my concerns about privacy, this is a very effective way of deterring people from doing funny things. And secondly, with all the information that's been captured using financial records, the authorities know a great deal about people's movements. And just using, as you know, AI techniques with big data, you can start predicting how certain people will do certain things, right? And maybe there is, an opportunity now to try some of those technologies out and just track a few people. This reminds me of pre-crime. There are a number of entities in the US that are doing pre-crime analysis and saying, we expect there will be a crime in this locality. And they could even go to the extent of saying, we think these people are the ones who are going to be likely to do that. Any such mechanism, I think, is on the table, because there is a limit to how much you can allow vandals and ruffians and anti-nationals to go around creating havoc and destroying public property.
I have a larger view regarding the state of West Bengal, and I don't know what your thoughts are on, Rajeev, but I will just share my thoughts with you. See, if you saw what happened as far as the destruction of the railways properties goes, Mamta seems to have made this calculation that railways is central property, and therefore destruction of central property would not come back to her doorstep. Unfortunately, I think she's wrong in this, in that she knew that crowds were thronging to railway stations, and those crowds actually passed through the neighborhoods where her rigged runs. Essentially, it was a failure on her part to try and see what was the reason they were going, and then they were returning back. So the state has its own intelligence department. That intelligence department should have triggered a way to try and stop these crowds from congregating. And I think that part, she owes an explanation to the country and to her state. So my thoughts going forward are, she's not going to cede power so easily in Bengal. There's going to be booth capturing of the most violent sort. There's going to be all sorts of dance dramas that she's going to be enacted. And my thought process here is that perhaps in Bengal, since the incidence of Bangladeshi and foreign population, including Rohingyas, is so high, that perhaps an NRC exercise has to be done in Bengal before you can have state elections there. So to that end, what I would recommend, and I'm just a layperson looking at the ground situation and making my observation, what I would recommend is that the current present-day government be dismissed under 356 of the Constitution, and then a central rule is established, an orderly NRC process is undertaken, and you have the accurate list of population that is eligible to vote, and then perhaps have the elections clubbed along with the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. I mean, I know it's a long way away, 4 or 5 years away, but the way this is being run right now, I mean, you can't have crowds be allowed to roam free and you can't have the majority always applying for permission to have a Durga procession or a Durga puja. This is nonsense. I think it is time that the center stepped in, dismissed this government, allow NRC to run. This is a NRC specific to Bengal, and that would be the hardest one in my opinion, because that's where you're going to have the most amount of variations, unrest, and whatever you have. But you do that, afterwards, the rest of the country is going to be easy peasy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you've made a very convincing argument about this, Sri, and I wanted to add, first of all, a small observation of mine. In addition to the railways, the other property that these agitators in West Bengal targeted were all central government property.
Yes.
You know, highways, toll booths, things like that. They very, very carefully avoided attacking any Bengal state property. So that was an obvious indication that this is not spontaneous. You know, this is well thought out kind of thing. But as far as your bigger suggestion of how to deal with West Bengal, see, what's happened is that West Bengal has been extremely antipathetic to East Bengali refugees. And you know about that island, right? Machijapara, or something, I don't remember the name, where some 50,000 refugees, especially Hindu SC/ST refugees, came to that island, and they were massacred. You know, there's a book by a gentleman named Deep Halder. I forgot the name of the book. I think it's called Blood Island or something like that. So, and nothing. There was absolutely no reaction to that. At that time, the Marxists were ruling, not Mamata Banerjee. And then there was the Anandamargis. You know, the Anandamargi group, a bunch of them were just burnt alive by the communist government. So, and in fact, what I see has happened in West Bengal is that the very same communists have simply changed color, and they have just joined the TMC. Okay, it's not as though TMC brought a whole lot of new voters on board. It's the very same extremely negative people who ruled there for 25 or 30 years and destroyed that state, who are now masquerading as TMC. And I guess you're right. They have had a stranglehold. They've destroyed that state. They have pushed all investment away. It's a hellhole. And just saw a couple of days ago a tweet by somebody who was celebrating the squalor of Calcutta. This is Bir Sanghvi, right? I'm like, nobody wants to live in squalor, right? There's no glory. There's nothing attractive or ennobling about squalor and poverty. But there is a certain group of liberals in this country who want, Calcutta and Bengal to be like that. But in going back to your question about, or your comment about the activities that can take place, I think it's way beyond the time that 356 should be applied to West Bengal, because just that one incident of burning several trains showed that law and order is completely out the window in Bengal, right? And I remember I cast my memory back to 1959, when the first use of 356 happened in India under the great Jawaharlal Nehru. He dismissed the communist government of EMS Namboodiripad on a triviality. There was no great law and order situation. There were a bunch of people agitating, and I won't go back into that in great detail, but it was a CIA-inspired coup, let's put it at that. Okay, and what happened is that there were two groups of people whom I won't name, but they're fairly obvious, who were rioting in a relatively mild manner. There was no huge loss of life or property or anything in Kerala. And Nehru peremptorily used 356 and dismissed the Namboodiripad government on what I think are specious grounds. So if that precedent were taken forward, it's been way beyond the time. And the tolerance shown by the central government towards the Mamata Banerjee government is too much, in my opinion. They got to put their foot down. Okay, so that brings up the question of, okay, what happens, as you said, if there is a governor's rule? Now let's look at what happened in Jammu and Kashmir under governor's rule. So far as I can tell, it's pretty normal there now, isn't it? Yes. In fact, the biggest sign of normalcy is that about 3 or 4 days ago, after the Soleimani killing, there's a huge agitation, protest. It was peaceful, but it was a big protest by Shias in Kargil, right? They came out onto the streets and they protested. Now, this is normalcy, isn't it? Right? It's not as though people are cowering in their homes, in their houses, they're lacking internet access or all those things. This is normal, right? So I think Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh have been quite peaceful, and normalcy has returned to them despite all the noise and the breastfeeding and the banshee wailing that certain motivated individuals are doing. So I'm thinking, if you have a strong governor in place and they put some, central forces on the ground, and the police are empowered to put down people. And furthermore, the technology things that we're talking about. Hey, you take photographs of everybody, you take videotapes of everybody, and you also use any other AI, ML type of techniques you have, then the ringleaders can be identified and neutralized. And I think, I don't know about your suggestion of waiting for 4 or 5 years to run an election there. Although it's a good question. I think we have too many elections. We should absolutely have concurrent central and state elections. Otherwise, you're politicking all the time. But the idea of having governor's rule is not at all a terrible idea at all. And it should bring some peace to that benighted state, is what I think. So I agree with you in general about what could be done. Now, what are the possible negative consequences? Yeah, they'll do more rioting, but then you put it down. There is, and you send them the bill. Send the bill to TMC. Your cadres have destroyed certain things. Here's the bill. Please pay up, or all of you are going to go to jail, right? So that's a pretty good deterrent, and people, are going to cough up the money. So, yeah, I think that's, and the NRC part. I don't see any reason why NRC should not be implemented in Bengal or all over the place. In fact, all this goes back, if you look at the historical records, these were things that the Supreme Court ordered, for example, in Assam, right? Because there is a huge number of aliens. Then, by the way, I want to use that term. See, there has been, in my opinion, an opportunity to use the term aliens, right? We should use the term aliens because these Bangladeshis are illegal aliens, right? And illegal aliens are treated very, very carefully in every country that I know of. Nobody gives them the right to riot. Nobody even gives them the right to, reside for a long time, except under very strict conditions. And certainly nobody gives them citizenship on a platter. So aliens, right? We have to make a significant distinction between illegal aliens, legal aliens, and refugees. We cannot just club them all under one umbrella and say, oh, let's give them all citizenship, which is in effect what the anti-CAA protesters are now saying.
Yes, indeed. And these are a little bit of out-of-the-box ideas. I think, India has to start responding faster. You can't let every incident go and then say, okay, because of this, there will be counter-polarization and that will reflect at the ballot box. I think the days for those are gone because, what has played out, this careful, trying to get around the legal blocks and, like CCTV cameras, this is a cat and mouse game. It will never end. But the fear of law needs to be instilled in each and every individual. And that's what is the most important thing. And I think, Rajeev, you've made some excellent points. Let's hope that, some things start happening, and let's see how things play out in the next few days and weeks to come. And we'll be back with more such interesting conversations. Viewers, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you can find it in your heart to donate to our channel, thank you very much. Once again, Rajeev, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sri, for the opportunity, and good luck with your book, which is now doing very well, isn't it? Do you want to say a word or two about it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, viewers, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods on the 12th of January. I'm going to be in Bangalore, and there's going to be a public function where the book is going to be released. And on the 18th, I'm going to be at Kochi in, I think it's called the Bharat Hotel, 5 p.m. And all are welcome. And we were going to have Dr. Sen Kumar as our chief guest there. So it's a lot of exciting things. And I'm also hoping to meet you, Rajeev, in person if you can make it from Trivandrum to Kochi.
I'll try. 18th, right? So I'll try 18th, if I can do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.